Preparing. Setting up.
This content is being, they put a little more thing on a new spot this time.
Oh, did they?
Yep. Tricked me, threw me for a loop.
All right, there we are. Okay. No, I do not want YouTube TV.
It's YouTube TV.
Something that YouTube's trying to sell it to me.
Oh, well, I don't think we need that. I think you're in trouble as it is already. If I could just fix this stupid thing again. All right. I think I'm in good shape, I guess. I guess I'm ready to go whenever you're ready to go. It's fine.
Well, we're live now. Good morning, Caleb.
Oh, wow. Hey, what's up, Caleb? What's going on, dude?
See, your Mets got a really good player.
Oh, that was lovely. Stupid Yankees. But anyway, yeah, we'll get going here pretty soon. That's pretty good. So, yeah.
Good morning, Estella.
Hey, Estella. It's going to be a cold and brisk day, Mary, here in the old 717. It's going to be cold again.
We saw Estella last weekend briefly. She came out to see us when we were in the encampment at the seminary.
Speaking of cold, huh?
Oof. Oh, God, that was so cold last week.
Oh, that was brutal. But it was
I enjoyed it.
It's fun. I mean, for the people, it was funny when people, because we did a living history thing at the seminary, at the Lutheran Seminary in Gettysburg last weekend with our friends from Bill Etzgorn and Ty DeWitt and Maria Black and Cindy and all the people from the
Tony aka Stonewall,
right, from the BMI, the Bureau of Military Information reenactment group, and people they must have advertised it as a reenactment. Because people would come to us and they'd be like, do a reenactment. I'm like, well, this is it. We're sitting around drinking coffee by a fire because it's friggin' 10 degrees out. There's your reenactments.
Well, I think when they see encampment, they make this assumption that it's going to be a reenactment. But yeah, people were expecting us to like fire the weapons and stuff. It was really, really funny.
Oh, it was like dance, monkey, dance.
Yeah. Good morning, Autumn.
Oh, hey. How are you? No, but it was fun though. But we were out there from 9 to 4 on Saturday, and then from 9 to 12. And it was fun. It's fun to get to wear the wool again and to get out there and just kind of answer some questions and see what the scoop is. But I enjoy doing it. It's a lot of fun. Anybody who's ever done any sort of reenactment, living history, encampments, anything, I would suggest you do it because it's a different aspect of history. You learn a lot about that. When we did the reenactment at Cedar Creek a month or so ago in Virginia, that was great because you actually got to basically live in that role for like the entire weekend. There was no radios and there was no anything. It was just living in the moment. It was different. I mean, especially if I don't think a lot of people who do the historian mindset get out there and do it. But I think you should. I think it's a great way to learn.
I think it's a great, and I mean, even if you don't like camping, just to camp once, even if it's not on a battlefield, like in a Civil War style camp, is definitely like worth doing because it gives you more of an appreciation, understanding what those guys went through. Estella asked how Antietam was. It was amazing. Highly recommend going to the luminaries at Antietam.
Yeah, that was. I mean, if anybody hasn't done the luminaries there, the illuminations at Antietam, and if anyone happens to know why they do it when they do, feel free to drop us a line because we've spent many aspects of too many hours of our lives trying to figure out why they do it in the first weekend of December. And even people we've reached out to in the history world don't really know either. So, but I think it's just the tradition they have. But it was great. You just drive through 23,110 lights, 23110, representing every casualty on that for both sides. And it's remarkable. You drive through there and you see them all, and then it's just because of natural humanity. You leave and you go, man, someone's going to clean all these up tomorrow because it's this 20. But then someone actually posted on the Antietam Facebook page, who cleans all these bags and these candles? It's 23,110, and they came back and they said, imagine cleaning the actual bodies the next day. Well, we got the bags taken care of, but just imagine.
But that was a great way to put it, this is just imagine how it was before, or how it was right after the battle. Morning, Barbara, Cisco, and David.
Hey, but no, I mean that's the thing is we try to beat the drum all the time with this about the humanity, about the personal thing, right? We say it all the time. And when you go to an illumination or you see things like that, it really brings it home because I think when you read and reading is obviously great, but the more you read, the more it dehumanizes a lot of it because you learn, the first corps, second corps, they had 6 Union Corps in Antietam, 7 at Gettysburg, and you try to, but then you realize when you go to an Antietam, you see the lives that are snuffed out
Yeah.
and wounded and captured. And then you get into the deep level, you start to read stories, guys like Edward Cross, we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Guys like Joseph Hamblet, we talked about, all those dudes, John Brown Gordon,
Yeah.
6 Alabama getting shot in the face, right?
And then like
not drowning because of his hat.
God, that's all
so because gross. Of mistaken order, which happens quite a bit. They tell you to fall back and reform. They all take off.
Yep.
And the Union gets around their flank and it's shooting fish in a barrel, the old sunken road. But that's the thing. That's what's great about it. And that's why, visiting the battlefields is the most important thing. And we will talk about this with Bill and the gang last weekend. And with Cody, you can read and you can watch the YouTube videos all you want, but until you walk the ground, you really can't get an appreciation. And we're blessed to be in a place where you can do that. We're within a couple hours of a bunch of battlefields, and a lot of people are in the same boat. But the best opportunity is to really get out there and check it out. That's what's so cool about it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a picture of something real quick.
Bill said, "At least we didn't have to pay to be the entertainment last week."
Yeah, well, I've been hearing fire trucks go by the seminary for the last couple of days. I think that's probably what the problem was. But it is what it is. But no, but it's really cool to see this stuff. And it's not just obviously Gettysburg gets a lot of press. We'll talk about all the stuff that's been going on here in Gettysburg this week, but it's all the ones, Chickamauga, Perryville, pick your battlefields. But there's stories for every one of them.
Speaking of Gettysburg and speaking of other battlefields, I think, and this is not a disparaging remark, it's something I was joking around about, we all were last weekend, but you could just feel the collective eye roll of the other battlefields with the guide exam last week. Like you just know, you're like, oh, here we go again.
Well, the guide exam is the big, that's what I was kind of alluding to. They had the guide exam last Saturday, and a lot of friends of ours took it, and based on their responses, varying levels of success. And it's a hard exam. But again, you're right. I think because CBS News was there covering it, and our friend Matt Callery got interviewed by CBS apparently, you can only imagine some of the other battlefields just kind of going, here we go again with the Gettysburg thing. But it's a big deal because it lifts all, rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yep.
Maybe it's going to encourage someone to study more. Who the hell knows? But I think it's cool. Someday I'll take it, but not today. I'm not really up for it. Yeah. But I think it's a great way to do it. But do it for the right reasons, though. And we've talked about this before. Is why in the world would you take the exam if you don't have the time or the ability to give the tours?
Yeah.
Right. And I guess much can be said for seeing how much you know and all that stuff. But I think if you're gonna do the exam, do it because you want to do tours. You want to present the history.
Yeah.
And that's why why a lot of people. That's why I didn't do it. If I took the exam and I was fortunate enough to pass it, I don't have time to do the tours right now.
No, because you have to put in so many hours a year and all that. And
you gotta live your life. You gotta work. You gotta pay the bills.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And
those IPAs aren't free, Mary.
Yeah, like it's the time and all that. Frank's on here. He said, happy 162nd Fredericksburg and 160th Nashville. Frank was also at the Franklin anniversary. That was 2 weeks ago.
That's cool.
So that was, they posted some great pictures. There was one picture though, I had to laugh. It was from the Franklin anniversary and it was one of the buildings. And there was a guy that was a splitting image of John Bell Hood standing there. I sent it to you and I sent it to
remember the guy from John Bell Hood in Plymouth? Last year? Yeah. I even took a picture with him. I pretended to know a friend of his, which I don't, just to do a selfie with him because he looked like John Bell. I posted that somewhere. I don't know what the hell it is. I gotta find that picture. But he was the spitting freaking image of John Bell Hood. Yeah. I mean, he didn't have the body falling apart aspect of it, but his face. It's history is wasted on the non-historians, unfortunately. Yes. Right.
Well, I was at Second Wind one time. You were at a football game, and I walked down there to have a beer, and I got talking to this one lady there, and her husband came to join her, and he was a splitting image of George Meade. And I mentioned that to him. I said, "Do you know who George Meade is?" And he's like, "Yep." And he's like, You look just like him." And he's like, "Well, I don't reenact Civil War, but I do Rev War."
Yeah, no, I have some Red War friends, obviously from our old place, but no, it's cool though. It is. I think it's a great thing to get out there and do it. But the people who took the exam, I'm happy for them. Glad they did.
Yeah.
I think it's a great testament to seeing how much you know, because a lot goes into it. I've
Mhm.
never taken it, so I'm not going to sit here and say I know what it takes, but obviously, but just by osmosis, talking to some people who passed it and some people who've taken it, you get a good idea. And I think the overwhelming thing about it is you have to know. I mean, you cannot be a Getty's groupie and pass this. You're going to have to be someone who studies all the battles around the
Yep.
whole war, Reconstruction, what led up to it, John C. Calhoun, all the way through
Yep.
Andrew Johnson, and knowing where all the battles come from. You're going to have to know Second Winchester. You're going to have to know Milroy. You have to know all these people because it all sets up with it. If you're one of the folks who just studies from July 1st to July 3rd, or you watch the movie and you think that that's it, I can see why you'd have a tough time with it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, you have to. I mean, the whole point is to give a full 360 experience with it. And one of the best things about this podcast, Mary, is having the ability or the reason to kind of study Perryville or Doxville or Pea Ridge or all these battles that
Yeah.
why the hell
These spear battles.
why in the world would you? But as you do and you start to study these, you start to notice how it all comes together. And then when you study at Gettysburg, it makes it a lot easier
Yeah, it
because
makes it everything makes more sense when you study them all. Frank said he did the 5 a.m. tour with Joe Reese, but he did not see Claiborne's ghost. Yeah,
oh,
they did like a 5 a.m. tour at Franklin.
please tell me you asked Joe Ricci about Claiborne's ghost. Please tell me you asked him that. Oh God, that would make my day. But it's cool. It's great that you do that, being able to see a lot of the actual history, and that's what's great about the anniversaries. And I know he's a big anniversary guy. He's always posting anniversaries of this and
Yeah.
that. But it's good. I mean, we're coming into obviously Fredericksburg is going on now. Stones River is coming up in a week or so, and then
Nashville's tomorrow.
Nashville, and it just doesn't end. It goes on and on and on.
Well,
So it's
James has a
fun.
question for you. You can answer this. Is Gettysburg the only field that has a guiding exam?
No, there are other ones. We would talk about this just this morning, Mary, as a
Yep.
matter of fact, while you were half asleep. You're hangover, right?
It's hungover.
Sure, Jan. But anyway, no, a lot of, like, for example, Antietam, you have to be accepted into their ambassador program, which basically is you're a volunteer helper, and you help with parts of the battlefield. You don't give tours, but they put you in positions to answer questions for guests. You have to do 100 hours of volunteer work. And at that point, you have the ability to take an exam. Gettysburg is unique because the Gettysburg Guide program has been going on here for a while. And so it's sort of grandfathered in. It does make it unique. But there are guides and rangers in a lot of different places. Our friend Mike Lentz, right?
Yep.
He's down there at Brandy Station.
Mm-hmm.
He does stuff. And so there's a lot, but Gettysburg is unique in the way they do it, and because it's really competitive. But again, you can be a guide at Antietam. You can be a guide at different places. They are heavily ranger focused, but the long answer to a short question is yes, but not as encompassing as Gettysburg is.
Yeah, like a lot like if you go to a Chickamauga, then you're going to be given a tour by like a park ranger there. Highly recommend Jim Ogden. He's like one of the he knows his stuff about
Mhm.
Chickamauga, but they have volunteers at Chickamauga as well that are quite knowledgeable. But I don't think they go out and give the tours. I know our friend Ed Lowe, he has a friend who gives a tour every year. I think Dave Powell comes and gives a tour.
Colonel Ed Lowe retired.
Yeah.
Go Army, by the way.
Yeah. The Army. I see why you were watching that. Frank said, I'm to the point where the folks at Carnton and Carter House recognize me because I've been like 6 times.
No, that's a good one to go to. And admittedly we haven't been to Franklin yet.
Yeah,
That's
we
one
have
of
to
those.
get there.
We were gonna go. We were gonna go this year but we just
Yeah.
never did for some reason. We were gonna go with around football.
Yeah.
Remember? And it just
Yeah.
didn't, for some reason, it just didn't work out. But yeah, we'll get down there soon. But it's a great time to see the battlefields because you can walk and you can see a lot of stuff that you don't normally. Like we were up at the Cupola last weekend.
Yeah,
right?
you could see all the way over to you could see the Culps Hill Tower from there because all the foliage is gone.
And you can see through the trees. You can see the forest through the trees, Mary. See?
Wow.
Yeah, like, think about that one for a while, right? But you can see a lot further because you can it's not as overgrown. But you
Yeah.
can walk in places now, and it's you can. I love walking here in Gettysburg behind the 20th Indiana. You can walk down there. You can go to Antietam. You can walk Burnside's Bridge. You can go on the Union side, walk up that hill, right?
Yep.
You go up that way, go with the fighting 51st War, Mary, 51st New York, 51st PA. You
Mhm.
can see where they came from. You can walk down those hills, walk on those same footsteps. And so it's a lot of places you can visit, a lot of places you can go.
Yeah, there's that like it's just so like I wish we had more time to spend at Antietam last weekend. Like I want to get there during the daylight and stuff because it's been so long since I've been there before and or been there. And I know we talked about going like for the day, but I'd like
Mhm.
to, and well, we're going to because you're be volunteering there.
Yeah. No, yeah, that'll be cool. But no, but just going back to the Antietam thing from last weekend, and what was really neat about it too, and I see Bill's on here, so he was one of the cars behind us.
Yeah.
Was you? It takes a while to get in there, but these are people who probably are not Civil War people. They're just going to see the lights. But it's
Yeah.
still pretty cool that they're waiting an hour in traffic. It's like leaving a football game,
Yeah.
right? And then you get in there and you take the slow roll, and it's tough to get good pictures because you have to do it while you're in a car, and then when the people in front of you stop, you get the taillights glare. So there's a
Yeah,
science to it. It was
it's tough to take pictures. I guess
I remember you complaining about the pictures.
I was not complaining about the pictures. Gentilly says he's licensing people for Chantilly. It costs $5,000, but you can eat a Reuben at a deli while sitting on the battlefield.
Oh, it's Chantilly. You can look out the window and see where Carney and Hazard Stevens went down. You know, they, no that
5K costs $5,000.
yeah, that's a lot of money, Mary. $10, a lot of money.
Buster questions on the exam.
Oh yeah. You know what? You know what's so funny was addressing Gettysburg did their post op with some of the people, the
Yeah,
three,
with Debbie, with Lentz and Jamie.
and it was fascinating watching that because just hearing some of the questions we were saying before, some of them were very surprised at how many non-Gettysburg questions were there, and that's what we were just talking before. I think Michael's going to do pretty well. I think he's sandbagging a little bit. Um, but it's weird because they both, or all three of them, got tripped up on the Trent Affair questions,
Which is our next episode.
by happenstance is our next episode. So they perhaps we should have done the episode first. They could have watched it, right?
Yeah.
No, and that's admittedly that took place in November of '61. So we try to keep it close to the calendar. But
Well, Seward's letter was December 26th because the cabinet met on the 25th,
right,
and then Seward wrote his letter on the 26th.
Right. So I guess it's still appropriate, but that's when the whole thing went down. And that for people who don't study the Trent Affair, it's really fascinating in how close this whole thing went.
Yeah.
And the British were convinced that Seward, who was the demon, this was probably Seward's greatest hour, by the way, it was Trent Affair. But they were convinced that Lord Palmerston saying this is a symbol that the Union thinks they're going to lose the war, so they want to fight us because they want to take Canada to replace the land. That's how England thought. And Queen Victoria's like, well, sounds good to me. And then they come back but what really got them is when the British, they declared the Confederacy a belligerent power. And they thought, and Seward, I mean, he probably had his big kimono on, like in the movie, right?
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
He's probably flipping out, saying, because that's a first step towards recognition. When you're saying you're a belligerent power, therefore you have to fight the international laws of war, which legitimizes your cause. You're not rebels; you're an actual fighting army. And Lincoln's like, "Oh yes, I tell you," and that's what was going on. And Lincoln, when they caught Mason Slidell, right?
Yeah.
And they shipped him up to Boston, Mary, over here at Fort Warren. They weren't going to let them go. And they were celebrated like, we caught these guys, woohoo. And everyone in Europe was flipping out about it.
Yeah.
Because they were going into this period of détente, right? Where there was everything, you get the Crimea thing, everything was settling down. There was no more wars. And things were okay. Maybe things going to be okay. Well, here comes here comes Charles Wilkes. Look who I caught. And then it almost overturns everything. Napoleon III in France, he's thinking, well, if the British are going to send their ships out to the Americas, we better do something too. So it was almost the beginnings of what could have been the First World War over these
Yeah,
two
it
people.
was, and I mean,
And it
Canada,
was that close. And then, but thank God for Seward. He was the, I don't want to say the adult in the room,
he
because
was,
every one of the cabinet people, Gideon Wells, all of them were all like, "You, we got him, yeah, who, right?"
yeah, and
And,
Seward's
and
like,
he's like, "We got to let these guys go." But then they're like, "How?" Because the press was so excited about this, it was like,
yeah,
they said it was. They called November 8th, 61, the second July 4th. That's how the press was pushing this. How a great, momentous
yeah,
thing it was. And the next thing you know, they have to. This is real diplomacy now, because everything could have gone up the spout. It was Charles Sumner, a good Massachusetts man, Mary,
yeah,
named for the tunnel. If you know Boston, Sumner
yeah,
Tunnel.
Sumner Tunnel.
He was the one who was brought to that December 25th cabinet meeting Christmas morning to help kind of get Lincoln off of this. And then the next morning, Lincoln's like, "Oh, I suppose we should probably,"
Yeah, and Seward
and,
wrote his letter about
you
it.
know, that's how it was. And Lincoln has that great quote, one of his little stories where he's talking about, Christmas morning, he tells, well, we'll talk about this in the episode. I'm trying to paraphrase. I haven't thought about this in a while, but he's like, neighbors walking by and they have a bulldog barking
Yeah,
in the front yard. And he goes to the neighbor and he says, "Is that dog going to bite?" He goes, "No, the dog's not going to bite." But he says, "You know something?" He goes, "You don't know if the dog is going to bite and your neighbor doesn't, but the only person who really knows is the bulldog."
yep.
And that was the quote about, is England going to attack? And they were going to. They had the Navy all ready to go. And
Oof.
then a couple of years later, you have everything going on with the boats, arming the boats. So they were pretty pissed off at that.
Oh,
They were
yeah, they
pretty
were.
pissed
Well, I
off.
mean, Britain maintained neutrality, and because of that, Canada took Britain's stance and maintained neutrality. But then you still had, Quebec being kind of Quebec is going to be the hotbed for the Confederacy. That's where all the spies are going to go up
Yeah.
there. John Wilkes Booth spent time up there. I think Jefferson Davis's brother was up there running. Like there was like part of the Confederate government was up there. Unfortunately, Montreal, they removed the sign, but there was once a sign that hung
Mhm.
that said Jefferson Davis lived here after the Civil War, and they unfortunately removed it. Um, but it was definitely like Quebec. Quebec, I don't think was neutral. It's pretty clear who they were siding with.
Well, I'm not gonna lie to you, Mary. I'm not over Quebec for getting rid of the Quebec Nordiques, the best jersey in hockey. So that's my problem with Quebec. But this was the first example of real diplomacy,
Mhm.
and the way they got out of it, the Americans was brilliant. They fell back on 1812. Said,
Yeah,
we fought because of what happened in 1812. This is the opposite. We have to stay the course,
yeah,
because they're like, Lincoln's like, how the hell we've been pimping this for the last month and a half about how great this is. We caught these guys, and how in the world are we going to get out of this? And then Seward goes, well, how about 1812? Remember what we did then?
yeah.
They went back and they go, yeah, you're right, and that's what they did. And so the Queen, they had to apologize to the Queen. You know,
Can you
uh,
imagine? Trying
you know, Queen Victoria. She looked like she was a lot of fun.
Oh God.
But again, and the reason why I mentioned is because I guess one of the questions came up in the God example, the trend. It's an important part of American
Yeah.
history, and it's an important part of the American Civil War, because that little incident could have ended everything.
Mhm.
Because the British were literally putting men on the ships to send over to send to Canada.
Yeah.
To eventually, they probably would have come up in New England, New York. That's where they would have come, and then the United States
They
would have
likely
had.
would have went into the Great Lakes as well.
Yeah, I mean, but what I'm saying is, you would have had Lincoln would have had to focus on that, and the whole thing would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
And what all they had to do was take the two guys,
Mhm.
because they got caught around Cuba in that area, Bermuda in that area,
Yeah.
or Bahamas, I mean, take them to shore, put them in front of a court, and that would be the end of it. But they
Yeah.
took them to Boston. They put them on a boat, put on Fort Warren, and said, "See you later."
Fort
Go,
Warren
go.
wasn't bad though.
Well, they had the Duncans, that's why.
The Duncans.
But that's what they did though. They sent them up there without a trial, just put them right in jail, and they didn't like that one bit,
Nope,
Mary.
did not. And one thing I was thinking about was kind of like you want it to be, obviously the guide exam is very Gettysburg focused, but there are questions on there that are not related to Gettysburg, which is just as important. And I think one of the things I was thinking about, and I mentioned this to some people, is I think you should know what happened in the months following the battle as well, because Army of Potomac goes through a lot of changes because of the woundings of men like Hancock, the loss of Reynolds, the wounding of Sickles. But one question I thought should have been, I don't know if it was, but one question would be, name the two commanders who went west.
Oh God.
And no, but it's not why I mentioned
And so it begins.
But no, you and I were talking about that this morning, that is something that doesn't get studied, is these, like, what happens to the AOP afterwards.
Well, you could also, there's also Confederates who went west too, man.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
west,
yeah.
right? You did, you
Yeah,
have,
name which generals, North and, like, Confederate and Union, went west
Yeah.
after the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I think a lot of people know that's a pretty basic thing, but you never know, because if you're going to focus specifically on, I mean, if you're going to study Gettysburg, you should study all the way through past Bristow Station.
Mhm.
You should fall all the way through there, because that's where a lot of the residual stuff, that Culpeper V area, right,
Mhm.
where Lee fell back and he's going to push back on Meade, and that's really an extension of the Gettysburg campaign anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, you should study the whole. No one's an expert on the whole friggin' war, but you should have a good, solid, understanding of the tendencies, right?
Yeah.
Of knowing the 64 plan by Grant, knowing what Jefferson Davis's plan was as far as going back to England again, the recognition thing, why he mistakenly thought the British were going to instantly recognize them because of the cotton thing. And he didn't realize he was, the North relied on the cotton just like the South did. And they were it was all the textiles. So England was really on both sides, but that's why they did neutrality.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you should want to study it anyway. What's cool about the Civil War is that is so many angles to it, and it all seems to come together.
Yeah.
It's like the movie Sixth Sense. Remember the ghost movie, Mary?
Yeah.
Where you're watching it, and it seems like these things are all disconnected. At the end, it pulls you together, and you go, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly how, like, the Civil War is, because you're looking at, like, like right now, 160 years ago, Sherman is just on the outskirts of Savannah. Hardy's got probably like, well, what are we going to do now? That's what he's saying to Beauregard.
Yeah.
Then you have Hood making his way to Nashville with his very broken Army of the Tennessee.
Yeah, and that there's a whole bunch of different angles to that whole thing.
Yeah.
And you can study the Confederates, and you can look at the game plan for Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, Gaines Mill. They're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to send a guy around the flank, hit echelon attack. It was Lee just dusted off the classics. You can look at Gaines Mill in 64, and it is a mirror image battle plan from Gettysburg or Chancellorsville. And if it works, try it. That's why Gaines Mill is really cool. It's a very underrated overland campaign battle because people focus on Cold Harbor, but it shows a lot of, you can sit there and read the battle reports, go, hey, you know something? I know this. They tried this at Gettysburg. Yeah. And Ambrose Wright broke that line. He got that close. Forget Pickett's charge, why they did it the next day here in Gettysburg. But you can see why that game plan, if it worked, let's keep trying it. And eventually the Union's not going to get lucky.
Yeah.
And you look at Gainesville, they did break the line. The Union did fall back. Hey, if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Yeah. Right? That's when you see I still just find the Western Theater so much more interesting, but I do find Gaines Mill Overland Campaign. I've always had an appreciation for it, but I definitely have more of an appreciation for it now. But I am still, as I tell you many times, I am still so much more comfortable in the Western Theater and in studying that, because I feel like I know the people better. I know Hiram Granberry and Patrick Claiborne better than I know Longstreet,
Yeah.
Even though Longstreet did go west, or even A.P. Hill. Sarah mentions the Trent Affair, John C. Calhoun, Daniel Webster, William Lloyd Garrison, Lincoln's Reconstruction Plan were all on the licensed battlefield guide exam.
As they should be.
Yeah.
And because every one of those tells the story to the bigger picture, right? Yeah. We say this all the time. Gettysburg is the volcano explosion, but all those people and all those small battles are the ripple effects that lead up to it. How can you know the big picture without knowing the small picture?
Yeah.
right? And you're not going to be an expert in John C. Calhoun or Lord Garrison,
No.
any of those people, but at least know who they are,
Yeah, you
right?
do.
And
Yeah, you need to know who they are, what their roles were, because it's all like when you look at it, especially into 1864, you see how these parts are all moving together and how what is happening. You know, Sherman's march, one of the things he's going to do there is he's going to break up the railways. He's not going to take out the Augusta Iron Works. I think it was Augusta, because why would you bother? Because once you take out the railway, you have no way of sending those supplies to Lee's army. And
Mhm.
it's going to be like this trickle down effect that the march is going to have. And I think that's one reason, I think the march is a little bit like, I find the Carolinas, like all that, way more interesting. I still find the march fascinating from like the logistical perspective. But just how too it has this trickle down effect that is going to start affecting the Army of Northern Virginia because they're not going to be able to get stuff shipped to them
Well,
because Sherman's ripped up the
right,
railway.
right, exactly, and it's good to know. So Sarah, you said,
Yes, Sarah mentioned.
did you Sarah, did you take the exam? Did you do it? If so, that's great insight. It certainly is, because
Yeah.
I think how can you not prepare for Lincoln's Reconstruction,
Mhm.
right? I mean, no offense to anybody who took the test and didn't, but that's a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah.
Now you may not know. I mean, Daniel Webster. Um, and I'll be curious what the question is, because Daniel Webster's 1830 speech, the second reply to Hayne, was a big part of the Gettysburg Address. So that would be a good
Yeah.
connection, a question to tie it together. Of the people, by the people, for the people. That comes directly from his speech.
Yeah.
Remember, we went to see his grave
Yeah, that was
up
cool.
in Massachusetts, and
Yeah, and his house is there too. Daniel
yeah,
Webster's house is there. They
and William
decorate
Lloyd
it for
Garrison.
Christmas.
He's buried over in the Boston area too. You didn't go to that one. That was the one with the grave with the girl in the jar.
Oh, the glass jar. Oh, that's
Yeah,
creepy.
that's where he's buried, and
I mean,
that's where Joseph Warren's buried there, Rev War guy. There's a lot of people there.
I saw Sumner's grave.
Yes, he's buried in Cambridge. That's like the Union
Yeah.
version of Hollywood in Richmond. It's like a
Yeah.
who's who of Civil War stuff. Um,
Hollywood
but
Cemetery in Richmond, where parts of Garnett are.
God, Garnett. It's
Sarah said yes, she took the exam. She said it was an experience.
good.
Good
Well,
for you, Sarah. That's awesome.
good for you, Sarah.
Hope you
Hopefully,
did well.
hopefully you passed it, and you know something. And if you didn't, then you learn for the next time and you take it again. So good for you. I'm sure we've heard some stories of people taking it. And you know what? It should be hard. I mean, that's what's great about it. It should be hard. It should not be easy. But at the same time, you can study for it, and you can know it, and prepare for the next time. But I'm good for you. Props to you for
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
It's a long day.
I had a friend who took it too, and she messaged me the night before and
And Sarah,
wished her good luck.
can you confirm or deny that they locked you out of the building for lunch, made you sit outside in the cars? I heard that. I heard old Angie was cracking the whip. You know, so
Angie.
so anyway, but good. I'm glad someone's on who took the exam. I think that's a great insight, no question.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I know my friend who took it, like, she said that she felt she did really well in the essay portion of it. And she said that, she felt pretty good about it. But she said she's like, if I pass, great. If not, then you know what? Do it again next time. And I think she was a former school teacher, and she knows
Yeah.
her Civil War history, like this woman I'm friends with. And she's always going to the different battlefields and stuff. But you wouldn't know she's a history nerd. I'm friends with her on Facebook, and she just posts pictures of her family. And when she goes to battlefields, she doesn't really talk much about that, except like she and I message each other about it. And
Well, it's a great thing to prepare for and study for. Hey, I hope, like I said, everybody who I know took that test, I hope they pass. I had nothing but root for nothing but success for anybody. But yeah,
I was even like, I know, like, it was like, oh my God, if I was doing this, I would be so nervous, because some people, like, this is like, it's their passion and they want to do it. And I think that's like that's the right reasons to do it, Barbara was asking how many they're planning to hire. Not very, I don't think.
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I think it depends on how many people they do it. I think what they'll do is they'll set a guideline for the written aspect. You have to pass a certain percentile to move on to the next one. Just logically speaking, you're going to do a 2-hour oral presentation.
Yeah.
They're not going to have 100 people. There's only so many manpowers you're going to have to do this. So I would imagine it's going to be limited. But I know they're expecting a big, well, this is what I've heard anyway, a lot of people to step down with the next couple of years. So the following exam, the next one,
Yeah.
people say that they'll look for more people. So if you're going to take the guide exam, wait till the, I was going to say, well, wait till the next time, because I think there'll be less people taking it and more people that are going to be going for it.
Yeah.
But if anything else, it gives you a reason to kind of study it. And we were sitting at the Blue and Gray last Wednesday, remember? And there's people at the bar cramming the tests and quizzing each other. It's a very unique Gettysburg situation.
It was really cool to see that. Sarah said, yes, we were locked out of the building for lunch. A bunch of us walked to the grocery store to grab lunch. We all waited to get back in.
That's awesome.
Can you imagine being locked out of the building?
And they're just trying to, well, I mean, they obviously have their reasons, but I think it's great. Anybody who's willing to put themselves out there, like we were saying before, there was a guy, what do you say, it was his third or fourth time he was taking it, Mary? He was sitting behind us and his buddy was quizzing him on the questions. And based on his responses, he'll be trying again for the fourth or fifth time. I'm not going to lie. He wasn't really getting too many of the questions.
He was like, you answered one. He's like, how do you know that?
I'm like, it's not, I mean, look, some people know things that people don't know, right?
I mean, the thing is that, like, I know so many people who are so knowledgeable with this, and that's like, I mean, I will never write the guide exam because I'm not at that level. And I study so much else about the Civil War. And honestly, like, if I'm going to really learn a battle that well, it probably would be Chickamauga, because that is the one. I do feel like poor Chickamauga gets kind of left behind sometimes. And it's like, so I always tell people, like, go to Chickamauga. It is like, it's such a different battlefield. I was telling Ty and Tony this, like, it's so different from Gettysburg because there's no statues to the generals. This is the first military park that was established in the United States. And, and I always tell people, some of the cannon that are at Gettysburg now on display here were originally at Chickamauga when it opened as a military park, and Gettysburg wanted them. So they had to, like, send them all there. But that would be the battle I would get to know, just because it's a lot more like Antietam in the sense that there's no general statues there. This is like, it's a battle that was, you're just looking at from kind of the regimental level. Like, one of my favorite statues, this is going to put out the Joe Reese back signal, is Opdyke's Tigers on Horseshoe Ridge, Snodgrass Hill.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, no one knows everything, but you want to study the best you can. So, but it's good. Hopefully Sarah had a good experience with it. I mean, hopefully she does well. But regardless, put yourself out there is good. And we know a handful of people who took it. And I think to a man, they all came back and for the most part said the same thing, that it was harder than they expected. And there was more non-Gettysburg than they anticipated. And some of them were actually very surprised by that.
Yeah.
To which I say you shouldn't have been. I mean, unfortunately, you shouldn't have been, because if you got a family from Iowa or godforsaken Ohio on a tour, okay, and they sit there and say, for example, how did Second Winchester affect Gettysburg? Why was Jeb Stuart away from the army? That's Gettysburg 101, right? But if you come back and you sit there and say, how did, the Corps command change in 1863 with Lee? How did that affect? I mean, that's stuff you should just know. You should understand that the political ramifications versus the military ramifications of a Vicksburg, for example.
Yeah.
And understand that Gettysburg is not that the winner or loser of Gettysburg was not going to win the war. It's a big aspect of it all.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to look at, why in the world, was Garnett court-martialed by Jackson? Why was A.P. Hill court-martialed over and over again by Jackson? Right? How did that affect them psychologically going into battle? Right? How did Trimble's experience at his leading up to losing his basically command affect him on the first day at Gettysburg and the third day at Gettysburg? The psychology of it, right? I mean, it just seems like that's where the sweet spot is anyway, is learning that aspect of it all.
Yeah, and so you'll understand it better. John Gentili said, you need to know all the details of the December 1861 Bog Wallow ambush down the street from my house, or you know nothing.
I think John's still one of those cannon, I think.
Could you imagine?
He's probably breaking into that Gunnell house over and over and over again. Good old Gentilly and Fairfax.
And then Frank said Chickamauga for the win. I finally have an understanding how that battle went after the last time I went. It is one of those battles that it is so complicated. I find it anyway for myself.
Yeah,
That
sure.
until you visit it, then you're finally like, oh, that's why they did it that way, or that's what was like finally when you and I went going down to where Wilder crossed gave me a
Yeah.
like it gave me a greater appreciation for what they were doing there because that was tough to defend that. Right.
Well, I mean that's the thing too is when you're studying 1862, and that was great about it. We say this over and over and over again. We have the benefit of 160 plus years of hindsight, right? Studying, reading Sears and Coddington and Hess and all these books, right? But the communication was so bad. And you look at coming off, speaking of Gettysburg again, coming off of the Maryland campaign, where the communication was so horrible. I mean, Bill's on here, BMI, for example. Alan Pinkerton told it like it wasn't. As far he gave so much bad intel to McClellan about troop numbers. And despite the fact that he was getting different reports, guys like Governor Curtin, but especially Pinkerton, he was counting the legs and multiplying by 2 is what he was doing with these Confederate army. So they're saying there's 200,000 Confederates, drinking their sweet tea and getting their brisket going just below the
watching
border,
NASCAR,
right?
you're gonna hit all the points.
No, but was saying, so if you're McClellan, what are you supposed to do? How are you? I mean, his history proved him to be wrong because he got his bitch on, no question, after going into Second Manassas, right? Because he was butthurt by John Pope taking over the army of Virginia, and so when he's like, hey, there's a lot of Rebs here in the Manassas area, I could use a couple of corps. McClellan, could you help? Can you hook a brother up? He's like, oh, I don't know, Dave. Right? So he spends 3 days, right, keeping those corps back, and then of course he gets routed, and then John Pope goes, well, I'm gonna say we won anyway. So he reports to Washington, we had a great victory at Second Manassas. We kicked Lee's ass. And that's like when you lie and you wait until you get caught, but you're in that wonderful buffer area where you get caught lying. That's where he was, and then everything fell apart. And McClellan gets hit on that because they're calling him a traitor and he didn't send the corps in. And 2 days later, his troops are still, he's supposed to send them over there, and they're still 15 miles from D.C., just sitting there. They're too banged up to travel. They're too banged up. But then again, what happens, all right? So he gets put in command and he takes over again. But that's the things that's kind of neat about it is you understand, again, I don't know, we're going on McClellan all of a sudden, but you're only as good as the info you're given. Right. And yes, he finds Lost Order 191, but that tells him where the Confederate troops are. And he has a good idea. They're probably going to go to Harper's Ferry, which
he does not sit on it for 16 hours.
No, he doesn't.
Commonly believed.
No, but I mean, again, McLaws, of course, gets lost going to Harper's Ferry because it's just a slow. They're on a national road, all those macadamized roads, and the dudes have no shoes and they're tough. You ever walk on a hot pavements with those shoes on, Mary?
Oh God.
But so that they have to deal with that. You've got everything going with George Lamb Willard gets pantsed up there and everything falls apart. But you're running into a situation where you're getting bad info, and then you get accused for it historically later on. Throw that in the fact that McClellan was kind of a dick.
But I mean, which one? See, I hate when people say, oh, he was like gossipy and he told his wife bad stuff. Okay, which one of us has never done that? And which general didn't do that? You don't think they're backstabbing each other all the time? They are.
I would never.
Oh, whatever.
I would never.
You would never make fun of anybody, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Just real quick, Frank mentions Pickett's Mill as another one that when you visit it, you understand how the terrain, he said the deep terrain affected that battle.
Yeah.
That was when I saw that, like, I was like, wait a sec, the Union went down this ravine and up against Granbury? No thanks.
Yeah, I might have been a conscious objector on that one myself. I might have pulled my F this card on that one. But again, that's the thing though. It was great about Pickett's Mill. I mean, for people who think that Gettysburg or Antietam is the same, Pickett's Mill is pristine. I mean, you literally, and there's really no monuments. There's a couple of flank markers and a couple of interpretive signs. But if you go to Pickett's Mill in Dallas, Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta, and you walk that battlefield, you're literally looking at the same thing that Howard and Granbury and Cleburne all would have
Yep.
seen. I mean, it's absolutely pristine. It's in those Western theater battles, especially on the Atlantic campaign. Resaca's pretty cool.
Yep.
Ringgold's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love Ringgold.
Jonesboro was a little built over, but we went to Kolb Farm. Remember, we went to Kolb
Yep.
Farm. You know, speaking of,
Kennesaw.
yeah, with a great Joseph Hooker, right?
Yep.
But that's what's great about it. You can go to some of these battlefields and you can see really you can make the same decisions that a lot of these generals made in a lot of cases. And you can look at a Pickett's Mill and you go, what the holy hell were they thinking on this
Well,
one?
I mean, like, when Howard got there, he didn't know where they were. And remember, he sent that thing back to Thomas where he ended it with, I think. Meaning, I don't 100% know what's going on. Can you help me out? Like, he's like, the rebels are in the area, comma, I think.
Well, because you're walking in thick forest where you can't see 2 feet in front of you. If you've been in places here in Pennsylvania or Maine or Massachusetts and places in the deep woods,
Yeah.
I mean, good luck trying to find your way and try to find your way knowing there's a bunch of thousands of men looking to kill you. Right?
Yep.
Forget it.
And when they came up against, like, and they are going up against the best in what is still Joseph E. Johnson's army.
Yeah, you're going up against battle-tested guys who've been around the block now. You're talking specifically, second half of the war, right? Yeah. You're talking anything after January 64. I mean, that's when the rubber hit the road with a lot of these guys. Yeah. And the men who were still there and still fighting on the front lines. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could look at troops. I mean, speaking of Granbury, look at the First Texas, for example, right? First Texas, everyone thinks of them here at Gettysburg, right? You think of Robertson's Brigade, the First Texas. And if you look at what they went through in Antietam, 82% casualties. Mm-hmm. They are the highest casualty regiment in any battle in the Civil War, and they're almost exactly tied with the First Minnesota. Yeah. But there were more Texans who went down than Minnesota guys, so they get the thing. Yeah. And now you're looking at more of these Texans fighting, and it just never ends. You're watching your troops go down and fight at these battles. And some of these Texan dudes, the first, the fourth, the fifth, for example, they went through pure hell, and they, like the Energizer Bunny, kept coming back.
Yeah. Well, I just can't even imagine. Like, I mean, Granbury.
Can you imagine what they would think of the Dallas Cowboys today? Just quitting.
Oh God.
How I'm just saying.
Would Hiram Granbury have been a Dallas Cowboys fan?
Yeah, he would have been theoretically. It's close to Granbury, Texas, where his town's name for him is maybe 50 miles west of Fort Worth. So it probably would have been, unless he was one of those dudes who just likes the 49ers for no reason.
But I think they were called Granbury's Texans, right? Because they tended to give them the names of the Confederates took on the names, basically. Mm-hmm. Those are not people I would want to fight against, because they were just so, I mean, Cleburne was very lucky with his subordinates. I mean, not only do you have a very talented guy in Cleburne, but you have a guy who is like, he's got probably some of the best subordinates in the Western theater. He's got Granbury, is it Govan?
Daniel Govan. Yeah.
And what's his face? Lucius Polk.
Yeah.
As well.
I mean, that was a good army they had. And a lot of people like to rip on Joseph E. Johnston, but he was doing the right thing in that Atlanta campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, he was falling back to, he jumped the Chattahoochee, and that was the end of him. But I mean, he was somebody who was just waiting for Sherman to make a mistake. And he did. Pigeon Hill, Kennesaw, Cheatham Hill, he did. George Thomas had to be the adult in the room there with him.
Yep.
Right.
And he's like, well, yeah, Sherman after Pickett's, I think it was after Pickett's Mill or Kennesaw, when he was like, well, we didn't lose that many guys. And Thomas is like, if we keep having battles like this, we're not going to have an army when we get to Atlanta, because you just keep putting them into the meat grinder. Never say Texans lagged in a fight. That Granbury's final words, I think, were never say Texans lagged in a fight.
Yeah.
His final words at, I just thought of this, but they're talking about Battle of Franklin on some Civil War page, and someone asked, who was the greatest loss, right? And everybody, of course, is saying like Cleburne, or no, besides Cleburne, who was the greatest loss? And someone said Granbury. And then they came back and said, but if we're talking about non-fatal wounds, also Granbury. And I'm like, I don't think Granberry was walking off that wound he got at
Yeah,
Franklin.
you don't rub your dirt. You don't rub your dirt in that one and walk away from getting
It's
shot in
like,
the eyeball.
no one's like, walk it off, Hiram, walk it off.
But you know what's great about think about the Texans now was thinking about the first Texas is speaking of Gettysburg here is that they had the balls they had. We walked the ground coming through Triangular Field, right?
Yeah.
William J. Barbie, and I hope he was on the guide exam test because I love the William J. Barbie story.
Barbie.
So Barbee, Barbie, right? So he's walking across the field, and if you know the area of the Triangular Field, there's a bunch of boulders. Somewhere there is a rock called the Barbie Rock, and no one really knows which one it was because there's a handful of them. He's fighting the Orange Blossom Regiment, 124th New York, Augustus Van Horn Ellis. And he jumps on the rock and he's shooting. And of course, you're a target.
Yeah.
And he gets shot in the leg, falls off the rock. He climbs back on the rock again. And the Texans are all cheering. Throw me a gun. He's still shooting again. He gets shot again on the other leg, gets knocked off the rock, crawls back on the rock, on his knees, firing. He gets shot again, knocked off the rock. He doesn't die, but he becomes a legend in the first Texas because of how their works regiment from the first Texas, because the balls. And he's up there giving the finger, probably saying all kinds of things that you say. We get bad reviews in our podcast because of your mouth. That's probably what he was yelling at these New Yorkers, right? But that's epitomizes the first Texas. Yeah. And if you're looking for a good regimental type story, look at William J. Barbie. And it's just a great Gettysburg story that kind of falls out of the wayside because just this people like to talk about Hood, right? Yeah. But that's the way it is. But
Hood kind of overshadows some of them. But then I did for some reason I thought there was guys from Franklin also at Gettysburg. I don't know why I got that in my head on the anniversary. But anyway, I just the Texans, I find myself becoming more interested in because of just the walk we did, but also just my interest in Hiram Granberry as well.
You could always tell a Texan, but you can't tell them anything.
Another of Claiborne's guys was Mark P. Lowry.
Yep, no, he was
as well. Which I did not know this. Frank mentioned this. He's a preacher.
Yep, he was.
Did not know that. And for some reason, Etzkorn just said the word undulations, and that reminded me of someone last week. I think it was Tony said something about it must be a Canadian word or something.
Undulations. What I used to live in Dallas for a couple of years, and so we didn't really talk a lot of Civil War because most people I knew were from the North, but they're very proud folk, and they're always right. They're always right. Next year, Mary, is the Cowboys' year. They say, and next year.
According to Ghost of Sickles' Leg, Hiram Granberry would have been a Lions fan.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was ballsy. He'd have gone for it on fourth down every single time.
Oh, he was...
Lions Bills this weekend, Mary, by the way. Do you realize the beatdown I hope the Lions put on the Bills this weekend? Just because. Freaking Bills.
Josh Allen has such a punchable face.
Patriots next year. We're winning again next year. We're back.
Oh, apparently the 26th Alabama was here at Gettysburg and at Franklin.
We tried to look into that. I have to look into that one. I have no reason to think otherwise, but that's
and 75th PA was also at Fort Granger, but not Franklin.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're talking completely different armies. So like we were saying before, we were trying. There probably would have been men crossing, or there was the first Tennessee provisional here at Gettysburg, but the first Tennessee was over in Franklin. Sam Watkins, Company H is over there, but there was also a first 7th, 14th Tennessee here at Gettysburg, but it was the first provisional. It wasn't the first Tennessee.
Yeah. So I gave up looking for it. I'm you know what, this is not a thing.
Yeah, so people think, well, the first Tennessee was at both. No, different guys, guys,
what was I? Lost my train of thought, shockingly.
Well, let the train go slow.
The Ghost of Sickles' Leg said of Granberry. So you're saying he gets knocked down, but he gets back up again? Does he drink a whiskey drink and a lager drink?
Chumbawamba. One of the
greatest,
the greatest one-hit wonders of all time.
So now that's Hiram Granberry's theme song.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he's walking that one off. He fell down on his knees and covered his eyes. And that's how he died. And he died like he was praying. Yeah.
I feel so bad. His story is one that is so sad when you look into it. The fact that his wife died of ovarian cancer. And when he came back, he threw everything into fighting that war because that's what she wanted him to do.
Well, I mean, the story that we talked about was of his photograph he got taken in
Yeah,
Baltimore. If you Google Hiram Granberry, you're gonna see the picture of him with that first grade hair sticking up everywhere, right?
yeah,
That picture he had taken only because he wanted his wife to have a picture of him when she died, because he had to go fight again.
yeah,
And he had to he was captured, speaking of Fort Warren in Boston. He was in prison there, and his wife would visit him. He gets released because of her ovarian cancer.
yeah.
She goes down to Baltimore and they can't treat her. And he gets a picture taken, a picture made, only because he wanted her to have an image of him, because he couldn't be with her because he
Yeah.
knew who she was. And this is, and you can see it in his eyes.
Yeah, after you told that story, I was like, oh my God, this is the saddest picture ever.
If you Google the picture, just know that at that moment that picture was being taken, he did it because his wife was dying and he wanted that picture to be in her hands when she died. And that was on his mind. And you can see it. You can see it in his face.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about personifying and humanizing these people. And when you study these stories at such a in-depth level, you get to know them as people. And that's why some people fall in love with their subjects. You get the Douglas Southall Freeman situation, right? But it's hard not to in some cases.
I discovered Granberry from studying Claiborne, and I always kind of found him to be fascinating because he's such a hard fighter. He's interesting. He's one of Claiborne's. I think he and Claiborne were very, very close as well. And we did the episode on Hiram Granberry as well. And I remember you talking about the fact he had a very deep voice and he was very tall as well. He was like, what, 6'3" or 6'4" or something like that?
He was 8'4".
8'4". Could you imagine?
No, he's tall. No, but I mean, he's like not quite Solomon Meredith height, but he must have stood out. And with his hair, he was probably 9 feet tall.
I know his hair is like all over the place, but yeah. And he goes back to the army. And one of the reasons he goes back is because he needs to get paid, probably to help pay for his wife's treatments and stuff with her illness. But what's really sad is that, so she passes away. He's in the army and he fights the rest of the war, dies at Franklin. Well, he dies at Franklin, so he's not fighting the rest of the war. But his men said he was never quite the same after that because they were very close. But she's buried in one spot and he's buried in Texas.
He's buried in Granbury, Texas. And it's sad because the problem with the story with his wife's grave is she died in, I want to say, somewhere in Alabama.
Yeah, and he could not afford to pay for a stone.
He couldn't, and so now the cemetery is on private property, and someone lost. There was no stone, and of course, that property's been turned over left and right since the 1860s. She's buried somewhere on that property, and they don't know where she is anymore. And there's no records, and because it's on private property, they can't do a survey to find it.
Yeah.
So she's lost to history. And so if you look at his gravestone in Granbury is and I was in Granbury once, but that's where I saw my tornado, Granbury, Texas. But she's listed as, she has a gravestone next to him, but she's not buried there.
She's not there. And I find that so sad. Like you just, at the end of the day, they're the one, like, it's like God could do anything to finally bring them back together. Like, I know they're dead, whatever, but still, it's just that whole, like, it's such a sad story that nobody ever talks about her. She's just this, and she was lost to history for a while. And I am probably going to portray her at an event in the future because I want to be able to tell her story because I think it's like just so. She's a woman who went to fight. Or not fight, but she was with him.
I will say that she is she's my favorite Fanny wife in the Civil War. We'll leave it at that.
I would agree. Yep.
She didn't date the Bowdoin football team. So we'll leave it at that.
Yep. But she's like, she was with him. She went to battle with him. They didn't have kids. They couldn't, which is also sad. But like, she was with him when he was captured. And that's why she went to Boston. So she was like John Brown Gordon's wife that went to war with him to still be with him. And she's doing this when she had likely endometriosis was what she had. So she was in pain a lot of time. But she's this and she was this short little thing, apparently. She was only I think 5'2" or whatever. But they were very close. They were like what you would say each other's best friends and stuff. And she just wanted to be with him. And there she's such a fascinating individual. And just her story deserves to be told. Frank said the 26th Alabama was with O'Neill's brigade, went to be guards at Andersonville. Then before they went back east, they got transferred to AOT.
Okay.
And there's not a lot written about them.
No, I mean Edward O'Neill. If they would have fought on the first day over by the Oak Hill, Edward O'Neill, a very underrated and competent in the Confederate Army, by the way,
Yeah.
Mary. You can make a case that he was a big reason why, and not Robert Rhodes that first day screwed up, but they still pulled it off.
Yeah.
Because he would not go with his men because he didn't have a horse. So while his men are attacking, he went back to Rhodes and goes, I can't go because I don't have a horse. What the friggin' you don't have a friggin' horse.
You just go without the horse.
Just go.
Get on the horse. Goes to Sickles Lake said, I wonder if Granbury had a death wish. I mean, he did seem to throw caution to the wind. I think after his wife died, he definitely was more.
I think a lot of these guys, and if you read a lot of the diaries, and we tend to read a lot of them, is most of them have this, it was all God's will. If I'm going to live or I'm going to die, it's already been determined. So I might as well go for it. And I think he was part of that. I don't think he was reckless and he just, he went all in going, I'm going to get killed here. I think he said, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's already been, and there was a lot of that. And that's what got a lot of the guys through it. That's why Howard's men, his Germans didn't like him, Mary, because he would sit there and say, it's already been determined, whatever's going to happen.
And they're like, no.
You attack, and these Germans are like, you know something? I wish you worry about my mortal ass than my immortal ass.
Yeah.
I would like very much to survive this.
And Howard's probably like, here's the daily Bible verse.
So here come the Rebs. I'm going to see you later.
Right? Maybe you'll remember this, but we talked about Fanny Granbury on a couple episodes, right? Because Estella wants to learn more about her. So Estella, we did a couple episodes where we mentioned her. I think one of them might have been, was it our Valentine's episode maybe?
I don't know.
I don't know. We talked about her in one, but then we did an episode about Hiram Granbury. And we talked about her in that episode as well.
Yeah, we did a thing on Granbury, didn't we?
Yep.
Like I thought we did.
We did a whole episode
years ago now. But no, Fanny Granbury, I mean, she's a fascinating story. So real quick, the story about her, Granbury is going to get captured. He's going to get sent to Fort Warren in Boston Harbor, which is a great visit. By the way, if you find yourself in Boston, take the boat over. There's beer in the boat, Mary. You took advantage of that. It's about a 45. No, I would never. But there was maybe like a 45-minute boat ride to go. Have you ever seen the movie Shutter Island? That's it. That's it. That with Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah. That movie was big. That's where it was. So if you see that's where it was. It was a white collar Confederate prison. It's where Mason and Slidell were from Trent Affair we talked about. That's where Trimble was put there. It's where Alexander Stevens was put for a while. But Granbury was put there when he got captured after Donelson. And so he ends up over in prison, and his wife would move to Boston.
General Grant gave him leave so he could go help her find an apartment.
Right. So just Grant helps Granbury's wife find a place in the city, which is probably very expensive. But she enjoyed her city of Boston. She went to a Sox game. She chanted "Sweet Caroline." She was into it. But she would go visit him. But she was always complaining about a malady in her stomach, and so by happenstance, Hiram Granbury's cellmate was an agitator from Maryland, from Hagerstown, who was a Confederate sympathizer, who was a doctor. And he was basically a Confederate spy in Hagerstown. He gets arrested. He gets shipped up to Boston, and he is Hiram Granbury's cellmate. And he's talking to Granbury and talking to Fanny, and he kind of says, something, based on her complaints, I think she's got ovarian cancer. Now, he's a doctor, so he's not just doesn't play one on TV, Mary, or stayed at the Motel 6 last night. He had legit background. And so she gets checked out, and it turns out she does. So he ends up saying, well, I need to take care of her. He petitions the Union government and says, he goes, something? You're good. Get the hell out of here. Yeah. They let him go to be with his wife who has cancer. They go to Baltimore to get treatment, and they could do nothing for her. At that point, he's been released. He gets shipped back with the Confederate Army. He's got to leave her.
He tells him to go back.
And that's when he gets the picture taken.
Yeah.
And she ends up going down to Alabama, and she finally dies of ovarian cancer. But that's a story, and it's a sad human story, part of the Civil War. but she, again, her body's bare, lost the time.
Yeah.
But she's a fascinating study. So we heard a lot about guys like John Brown Gordon's wife, Frances Barlow's Arabella, who followed them with the armies.
Yeah.
But she was one who, because of her sickness, got her husband out.
Yeah.
And she's like, you got to go fight.
Yep. That's
Don't
what she
worry about
wanted him to
don't worry about me. And it's a sad human story, but it's an
Yeah.
important story.
Mhm.
When you study these people as humans, it's tough not to hear the story of Hiram Granberry and Fanny and not feel bad, because you can, a lot of people can relate to that in their own personal lives, right?
Yeah, and I love her story. I love telling her story because I feel like she needs a voice in history. Another cool thing we found when we researched the Granbury episode was that there was some letters that Granbury was writing some other guy that didn't get captured at Donelson, and he said Granbury mentions they played a form of football at Fort Warren because they would let them out. Like they played football, they played baseball.
Yeah.
They were let out every day, but Sundays, I think. They would get newspapers, so he was, able to see that.
And if you go to Fort Warren, like we said, it's a great visit. It's just exactly the same. You can walk, you can see the cells, you can see, and it's spooky. Not gonna lie to you, but if you stand on the parapet and you look across the harbor, it's the middle of Boston Harbor, you get a fantastic look of all the skyline of Boston. It is fantastic. But
when we were there, I remember being very aware of that. Was we were walking around that yard, I was like, okay, we're walking where they played baseball. We're walking where these men were walking.
And then this was not Elmira. This was not Andersonville.
No, these are officers.
This was a white collar prison. They were
Yep.
fed. They had their own cells. They got to go outside all the time.
The guy there, though, the guard there was very, like, I think ahead of his time in how prisoners should be treated.
Yeah, I mean, it
Pretty
was
much the opposite of.
I mean, it's no picnic. I mean, it was cold during the wintertime, and they made him keep the heat at 60. I mean, it was brutal, but still.
Gee, what's that like?
Heat on at night, freaking break. But that's the thing. If you go to Fort Warren and you visit a lot of these prisons, that's one you can go to that's still almost exactly the same. Go see Shutter Island. Watch the movie. I've not seen it because you get to see it.
Yeah, and definitely if you're in Boston, it is worth a visit. It's so like Darren said, like Isaac Trimble was also there. Stevens was there as well.
Slidell and Mason were there.
Yeah.
They were there. And there was a lot of people there. And they used to be a marker, because I think
they removed the marker.
There was I think there was, oh God, there was 9.
There was a handful who died.
It was like 9 or 10. It wasn't a lot, but they had their names on a marker, and of course they took it down, which is unfortunate. But that's it used to be, I believe, the furthest north Confederate monument.
Yep.
Until they took it down, because I think I don't think there's a marker at St. Albans, Vermont. I don't think they have one there.
No. There was one in Kincardine until recently.
Yeah, I know, which is too bad. But Solomon Secord Monument, but it's a cool visit, and there's a lot of Civil War in Boston. By the way, we were trying to get the Civil War Trails guys to put a marker in front of Robert Gould Shaw's house,
because his house is just down the street from the 54th
on Beacon Street. So, nope.
Nope. I wanted them to put a marker in Goderich, my hometown, for Sherman.
Well, in defense of them, though, it's the city has to agree to it, and it would be right in the middle of a sidewalk, and it's a busy thoroughfare, people walking down. If you know Boston, it's between Cheers and the State House, about halfway down on the same side of the street is the house that his family was at when he parched it with the 54th Mass. But,
so there's a couple comments here. So Frank said, Isaac Trimble probably requested another prison assignment when he was there. And I was just about to say yes. And that's when they shipped him to Johnson's Island. Scott is on here. I think we met Scott Hagara. I'm not saying his last name. I think we met him last weekend.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was. No, it was another Scott. There's a lot of Scots that.
Well, I was frozen through at that moment, so I could have met Elvis. I wouldn't remember the name, but it's okay.
Yeah. No, I know his name was Scott, and we took a picture with him. But so he said, wasn't Trimble at Johnson's Island? I thought you did a Facebook Live.
Yeah.
Yes, we did a Facebook Live from there, and he could not be released. You're right. He could not be released because of his knowledge of the railways.
Yep.
Especially in Pennsylvania, and just around, because before the war he was involved in building the railways in North and South, and he had a great knowledge of them. And it was actually Simon Cameron, Lincoln's first Secretary of War, that wrote Lincoln and said, "I heard you have Isaac Trimble as a prisoner. Do not let that man go, because he has knowledge of the railways that would be very dangerous." Okay, Scott confirmed it was not that Scott.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
okay.
Maybe we'll definitely do that next time. Then. But no. Johnson's Island was a cool visit though.
Yeah.
That was great. It's too bad that not a lot is left. It's just the cemetery, and it's all big fancy lake houses now. But
Yep.
but yeah, but Trimble was a kind of pain in the ass, man. He was.
Yep. So he started off at Fort Warren and then they sent him to Johnson's Island.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Going from Massachusetts to Ohio. Yeah.
On Lake Erie in the winters.
I don't give a whatever. No, but you're right. Because he knew that the railroad lines, that was a big thing. And I mean, it's all transportation. I mean, when you look at, it was tough to get anywhere in the Civil War on the roads in any of these battles. Like we said before, for every 10,000 men, you needed 30 miles of road when you factor in their wagons and supplies. And it isn't like you've got I-83 here in Pennsylvania. You got these small little roads. And speaking of Gettysburg, they always talk about the 10 roads. There's really 3, right? The Chambersburg, Pike, York, and Baltimore. The rest are small little roads that come in.
Hanover Road's not.
I mean, Carlisle. I mean, there's only so many. Those are smaller roads, but there was 3 pikes that came into town. So when you look at bringing the troops here, there was not a lot of space to march them. But especially out west, you have that one primary. You have basically the National Road in Maryland, which probably saw more Civil War soldiers, footsteps than any road in America.
Yeah.
But if you knew the trail lines, if you knew the rail lines, I mean, that Herman Hopps, Isaac Trimble, you were an elite person as far as knowledge goes. So you were a target.
Yeah. And Caleb said the guy who portrayed Trimble in Gods and Generals in Gettysburg was perfect. I'd like to think that's exactly how Trimble was. Was he the one that was like, give me 1 brigade?
I don't know, but you know what? That's a good question. I mean, I've only seen Gods and Generals a couple times. But the one who played him in Gettysburg, I mean, that scene never really happened that way, but still he was somebody who he was very opinionated with a lot of these people.
Yeah. I remember watching the director's cut one time with a non-Civil War person, and the scene came up that was taken out of the original movie, which had Trimble, was it Trimble, Rhodes, Hill, talking to Lee, and the person I was watching with, she was like, "Oh my God, this makes so much more sense. Why did they take this out of the original
that's
movie?"
The thing about, I mean, like, when you have 26 minutes of marching in the movie Gettysburg, just marching with just walking, you could maybe have left a 5-minute scene that explained a lot on the Confederate side. And they took it out, which I don't quite understand that. If you're the actor who played Robert Rhodes, you lost your entire. That was it.
Yeah.
So
when they were standing there, my friend, she was like, this makes so much more sense about the hill and all that. And like, they're talking to Lee. And Caleb, I threw down my sword in front of him. It's the same actor in both films.
Well, the truth of the matter is, Trimble was pissed off at Ewell for not, when he was standing down the street here, wouldn't take the hills. But again, you can't blame Ewell for that. I mean, you just can't, because what are you supposed to do? Ewell's got really a good success as his first job as Corps Commander at 2nd Winchester. You do everything wrong on the first day of Gettysburg, and you find yourself in position to win that first day's battle, the Battle of Oak Hill, right? That's what Cody explained it as. You're going to throw that all away, and the fact of the matter is, the 12th Corps is there, and they know it's there. That's why they didn't take that hill. I mean, people question that over and over and over again. It's simple. 12th Corps. Yeah. They knew. You have extra Billy Smiths allegedly seeing the troops over there. Their fence posts, what the hell he's seeing, but he thinks they're soldiers. But he knows they were there. So you're going to go walk up high grounds and you're going to fight these guys when you've been fighting all day, and Lee doesn't want to give you reinforcements, and it's getting dark. All the DQs are closing.
I'd be like,
get there quick. And the holiday traffic on July 4th in Gettysburg, you're freaking kidding me?
Scott mentions that the folks at the Seminary Museum, and we were talking about this last week too, to say that Trimble was the most obnoxious patient they had. I'm somehow not shocked by that Isaac Trimble would be obnoxious.
Yeah, I'm sure he was. I mean, you can kind of imagine just reading his stuff. All he did was complain. I mean, that's just the way he. But I think he was someone who felt that he was probably given a short end of the stick. It seemed like he was always in jail. I mean, he just was. I mean, just saying that he
always was in jail.
For a guy who knew all the answers, knew the trains, he got caught a lot.
Yeah. Well, and then so he gets shot in the leg at some battle, and he's like, don't take my leg. So the surgeons are like, fine, we'll save it, right? And then he gets shot in that leg again. And then apparently he said to the surgeons, you should have taken it the first time.
Oh, he's God.
It's like, dude. No. Ambrose is
He's,
back. Ambrose says, hi, everyone. So I haven't been here for a while. Late nights with school have been making it hard to make it here. Great to have you back.
yeah, no, it's always good if people to jump on here. It's but it's just pretty cool though. You can you're studying up for these guys, you get a good idea. But that's the problem is sometimes somebody will make one throwaway line in a diary and it becomes their personality
Yeah.
for history, right?
Yeah. And that's so, you see that so much. It's so unfair how some of them get treated because of something they said to their wife or whatever, right? And it's like, well, who of us is not venting to our significant other or whatever, like McClellan? Or, you see the movie and then that's your tunnel visioned on like, this is how it actually happened. Like Hancock was not on the battlefield, or like he might have been, but he was not the one to greet Meade. And that scene has become canon amongst some people who study Gettysburg. They're like, yeah, Meade went and talked to Hancock. He didn't. He went, when Meade arrived, he met Howard, Slocum, and Sickles at the cemetery gatehouse. And the conversation in the movie that Hancock has with Meade is what Howard said.
Yeah, I mean that's the Gettysburg movie people versus the Gettysburg history people, and
Yeah.
the lines get blurred, unfortunately, sometimes in the middle between that. But that's fine. But again, the movie is good, and it's done a lot
Yeah.
for the
Oh, I
Civil
love
War
the
community.
movies.
Did a huge amount for the reenactment world. But again, it doesn't paint the right picture. Sickles is not even in it,
I
right?
know.
Meade's in it for 2 seconds. Howard's in it for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
AP Hill. I mean, in real life, he was sick the whole time. He was not even
Yeah.
here. Heath, I mean, he gets
Heath was
knocked.
like knocked
Well,
out.
he gets knocked loopy and gets shot in the head, but because they stuck the newspapers in there, and he saved his life. But he was out like a light, and he's standing there with the bloody sock and
It's
Kurt
like he
Schilling
would
in the
not have
playoffs.
been standing up
He's just
there.
standing there going, "Yeah, I can tell you, I think."
Yep.
It's like no. I didn't want to worry about that. But I mean, the movie's 3.5 hours long as it is. What are you going to do? 10 hours long. You put Colville in there and Ben Ellis in there, and Burgoyne. You just can't. But it is funny how when you realize that movie is just a bro film built around a war, and it obviously it really embellished Hancock. It did.
Yeah.
And it oversold Chamberlain, but again, that's what they tended to focus.
And not picking on Chamberlain. He does great things here at the battle, but it does elevate him to this status where it's like, oh my gosh, am I gonna, be like F Chamberlain? No, I'm not. I respect what he did here. He's a great soldier. He's very talented, but it's kind of like David Ireland and the rest of the 12th Corps, they kind of get left behind.
Well, Ireland didn't survive the war, and that's a big part of it. Is the thing about Chamberlain is he could write. I mean, you read his passing of the Army's book, it makes your brain hurt, right?
Yeah.
But he could write, and so it's easy if you're Michael Shara and you're doing research to find the stuff that exists. Dave Ireland, 137 New York, is probably more important, admittedly, but he doesn't survive and he doesn't write anything. So if you're looking to put a manuscript together and a book together, you're gonna find someone who lives so you can write about it. It doesn't minimize what Chamberlain did. It's a huge part of the American Civil War, a huge part of Gettysburg. But the line in Ken Burns' movie, a professor from Maine saved a hill in Pennsylvania, maybe saved the Union. That's a little overplayed.
It is,
right? Yeah. But it doesn't mean that what he does doesn't mean he sucks either. Right?
No, it doesn't. He absolutely did not. And he's an important figure in the American Civil War. Hopefully, if they remake Gettysburg, they make Buster into his horse.
Oh God, no. But some people get so offended at the Chamberlain thing.
Yes. And I remember one time having a conversation with some people, and they were going on about how David Ireland gets left behind, blah blah blah. And I finally said, I'm like, well, I know how you guys feel. Because that's the Howard Hancock thing right there.
Yeah, but it's like a lot of these people. I mean, when did you first hear about Ireland? I seriously doubt it was 10 years ago, 20 years. A lot. It's new knowledge. Mm-hmm. But if you learn it it's not one versus the other. It's all these things.
They all have a role.
I mean, speaking of Franklin, right? I mean, there are people who minimize Claiborne.
Yep.
Because he gets too much credit. But Claiborne was the best, in my opinion, that they had.
Oh, he
And,
absolutely was.
that was a huge loss. I realized John Adams was killed, and States' Rights
Just,
was
yep.
killed, and you go right down the list, and it was a whole bunch of 6 total who get knocked out. But that's a huge loss. And talking about him doesn't mean it minimizes the other ones. That's just who they focus on.
Yeah. It's not like, uh, I find that weird when somebody will go and like slam Claiborne or say he's not that good or he's not as good as what he's made out to be. It's like, okay, study him. He does make mistakes, but if you study him, his trajectory is constantly up. Like he does make mistakes like they all do, but the one thing he does really well, and a lot of them did this too, he learned. He was like, this happened at Shiloh. And if I'd had, he realizes that at Shiloh, if he'd had
Well,
sharpshooters, he could have taken
well,
out the artillery
but
horses, like
there's
something like that.
right, but all these battles though, there's so much Monday morning quarterbacking
Yeah.
going on in the contemporary intent. I mean, today, right? So
Yeah.
you could look back and there are people who rip on Meade for the retreat, right?
Mhm.
And so they're in Williamsport. They're at Conaghey Creek. They set up that battle line. They don't attack. The Rebs sneak out the next day, and he gets blasted on that. He's got July 12th. Meade's got to telegraph Halleck and say, well, they seem to be taken off. They're out of here, right? But again, it's easy to look back on the fact that if he attacked him at the creek then, he would have had success. But you don't know what you're going into. And
No.
when you look at a lot of these, well, this guy should have done this guy should have done that. That's great. And you could sit there and say, yes, the Lions should have kicked the ball in the NFC title game both times on 4th down. They would have gone to the Super Bowl, and they may have even won. Who knows? But they didn't. But in real time, that's the decision they made. Okay. And that's the reality. The Dodgers probably should keep hitting the ball to Judge because he keep dropping it, and they would have won the game in probably 4. They would have won the
Can't
series.
stand Airhead Judge.
Right? But what I'm saying is it's easy to look like a sports mentality at a lot of these things, when in real time, the fact that they can make it from Fredericksburg to South Mountain is a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
With the fact of how these roads were, and you're going through Fox's Gap and all these, just because you're not here for, you just don't know. And that's the problem with a lot of the people who study this now, is they sit there and rip on these guys.
Yep.
Well, this guy should have done this. Howard should have done this. I'm like, well, you know something? They could have used your info and your expertise 160 years ago, because you know what happened. You know how the result played itself
like
out.
like at Pickett's Mill. If you go to Pickett's Mill, you will it's easy to rip on Howard and Thomas if you haven't been there. But if you go there, you will understand why Howard was not sure where they were, because the terrain, it sucks. It's terrible. And Claiborne lined his guys up. You go and you can stand on one side and there's this steep ravine, and you're like, holy shit, if I was a Union soldier and I was standing here, I would be looking right across at the flag of Claiborne's men.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Hiram Granberry staring back at me. And I have to go down this ravine. It's steep. It's like this and up. No thanks.
I mean, if you're Richard Stoddard Ewell and you're standing over there on Middle Street and you're looking at the hills, and you take that hill of practical, but don't bring on a general engagement, right? Okay, fine. If you know that you probably could have taken it in history, you should have taken it. But if you're him in real time, same thing with me, Chasing Lee. Lee was smart. You read Kent Masters and Brown's fantastic book on the retreat from Gettysburg. He would set fake campfires in the mountains, look like they were ready to ambush them. And sometimes you get beat, right? And that's what happened. Yeah. But you just want a huge necessary battle. You slow down that Confederate machine that had been rolling since June 1st of 1862. You're going to throw it all away by being over aggressive. I mean, look at Kilpatrick, poor Elon Farnsworth, right?
Yeah.
Over aggressive on South Cavalry Field, got his ass killed. And they realized there are still Confederates here. We push them back, but if we charge at these guys, there's still thousands of Rebs who are still there who are ready to fight. Let's take the W when we can, and we'll pursue them closely with guys like with Judge Kilpatrick and those guys. But we got to be careful.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to throw the baby away with the bathwater. But again, people will rip on Meade. And even Gelzo doesn't rip Meade for that.
No. Talking to Gelzo, really, that episode we did with him was awesome. And to see that he had a picture of Meade in his office, you could see it in the background. pretty sure it was Mead, but he likes Mead. He just points out things that people don't like to you'd like to think about when we think of George Mead, that kind of thing. And, I was telling you this we were talking about this last night, and I said, I'm like, it was really great for me as someone who studies Howard to have that kind of confirmation that someone else sees Howard as being an abolitionist, because I've been told that he's not. Like, people said Howard wasn't an abolitionist. It's like, okay, well, go read what he wrote.
He would be
Abolitionist.
he would be an abolitionist by today's standards.
Yeah.
Even he was that far on it. And I know the Indians and Nez Perce. I get all that, but again, you still got to follow orders. You still got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. He didn't treat them as bad as Sherman and Sheridan did, though. Like, that's the thing. Like, Sherman and Sheridan that's like something that doesn't really get talked about too much. With them, but like, but talking to Gelzo, especially like how he was with Mead and all that, like, just really, he's a great person to talk to.
I mean, he's got a poster of Mead on his wall behind him, and I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of, it's like having a crazy uncle, right? Who you just don't talk about the bad things he did, right? Yeah. And Gelzo talked about the bad things Mead did, and people don't like that.
Yeah. Bjorn's on here too.
Oh, hey, Bjorn. Fact of the matter is, he did try to meet with those Confederate envoys.
Yep.
He did write his wife to say this whole thing is stupid. We shouldn't be fighting this. We should make peace with these guys. But again, that doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't make Mead bad. It just means in real time, you're trying to think about the big picture, But
exactly. Bjorn asks, what are we talking about today? Snapping turtles?
We haven't talked about, by the way, is the episode we just did.
I know, yes. So Bjorn had the author on.
He reminded me.
Yeah. So we had Dr. Robert Casey Colby on last night or a couple nights ago, to talk about his book Unholy Traffic, which is about the slave trade. Bjorn also had him right on here as well. Yes. Amazing book. You're looking for if you want a book for Christmas, get that one.
Yeah. And the thing about that book is it's basically talking about the slave trade from an economic standpoint. Dollars and cents, stocks and bonds, futures, investments. And it's like reading an economics book, but instead of bonds, it's human bondage. And it's hard to read from that perspective. But we had him on. We just dropped the episode last night. And it's a great book. So Unholy Traffic by Robert K.D. Colby. That's a book you definitely want to pick up and read, because it gives you a different perspective. And it really talks a lot about the fact that, you're looking at the Union Army invading New Orleans. You got a slave trader named Joseph Bruin, who has a bunch of big market, and how the economy changed, for example, and how they would, because the Confederate paper was so worthless, they would buy slaves, figuring they would win the war. It would be futures and commodities. It's very interesting the way he talks about it. And if you're one of these folks who thinks slavery had nothing to do with the war, you're not going to like it, because it puts it at literally dollars and cents, an economics factor to the importance of the fact that cotton is the 19th century version of oil, and slaves, for the most part, North and South, it benefited them because they were the lifeblood to keep the cotton going.
Yeah.
And it talks about guys like Stonewall Jackson trading slaves. Henry King Burgoyne, speaking to him at Gettysburg, was a huge slave trader. And people like that, Shanks Evans.
Yep.
It was just part of the reality. And this book tells a really interesting story. It's not an opinion book. It's not Dr. Colby putting his opinion. It reads like an economics book. So if you have a finance background or something like that, you'll probably appreciate it more than if you're reading from a straight history perspective. Because if you don't understand finance and don't like finance, it's a tough read, because it's a little bit on the dry side if you don't understand that. But if you do,
worth reading.
But if you do, you're gonna love it, because it explains a lot. If you want a good insight into 19th century Southern economy and the world economy, like we talked Trent Affair, for example, it talks a little bit about that. It really puts a lot into perspective. So I would suggest reading the book. I think it's and he's a good dude too.
He's a great person. Bjorn mentions that he still has copies available if you want to buy it from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, which we would strongly encourage. Independent bookstores, you have to support them. They have copies available. I posted a link to their website. Also, check out what else they have there. If you're a Civil War nerd, it's coming up to Christmas. You might be able to find some things for your Christmas.
Follow him on Twitter or whatever it's called.
Or
X
Facebook.
Now. Facebook, Robert KD Colby.
Oh, yeah.
He has a Twitter page. Let him know, if you buy the book, let him know. Because again, he's a great guy. He's a young dude. He's went to UVA for his graduate, just like Carrie Janney. And he got his master's and his PhD at North Carolina, where Bill Belichick is now calling home Mary. It's a strange world we live in. And he teaches at Ole Miss now, and he teaches Civil War history down at Ole Miss. And it's a fascinating book. It's really an eye opener on a lot of different things. It talks about Robert Lumpkin, Devil's Half Acre in Richmond. It talks a lot about it puts the slave trade into an economic versus a human aspect.
Yeah,
it obviously touched on humanity too, but it puts him. It's really just an economics study of the slave trade in the South.
But it's
But again, and I was going to say, and this doesn't make the North look like angels either, because you talk about specifically guys like Benjamin Butler when he went into New Orleans. He would let the plantation owners keep the slaves working and not free them if the work they were doing like sugar plantations. If he promised to give the sugar to the Union Army, as long as you give it to us, well, you can do what the hell you want with these guys.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is not a good versus evil thing, right? Stretch imagination. It's a real look at the economics of how slavery impacted the country, North and South, and England too. So definitely pick it up. I think hopefully you watch the episode, because we talk a lot about, obviously that's all we talk
and also
about.
Go back and if you go to Abraham Lincoln Bookshop's Facebook page, go back on their episode, or their they do a live stream, and you can watch them after it's happened. Bjorn also interviewed Dr. Colby, and definitely watch that too, because you're going to get like all the information about it. And like I was saying, if you want to purchase the book, definitely get it from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, because Bjorn says he has copies. Bjorn said also it's a great book on plowed ground. Estella just said, I was going to ask you both about what the war really was about, economy or slavery. I haven't listened to the episode yet, but I definitely will do this. Like, South's economy was very much tied. It was tied to slavery. That's where
there's a million, like, there were obviously people fighting for the South who did not give a fiddler's F about slavery. There were people in the North who were not fighting for slavery. So it wasn't this whole thing. Even after the Emancipation Proclamation, it wasn't. But what the book does do is it talks about how impactful it was to the economy. Yeah. And what an absolute bomb it was being dropped on the city to end it, and how impactful it was on dollars and cents. Millions and millions of dollars were wiped out immediately in the South. People in the North lost a lot of money. The textile people up in Lowell, Massachusetts, for example, because they relied on Southern cotton. And we talked, the Trent Affair was partially based on that as well.
Yeah.
So the answer to that question is yes, it was a big part of it. But again, there's a million things that go into that. That it's not an easy answer when you're talking about.
It's a reminder, though. I think on Holy Traffic is a reminder, though, that slavery was a huge reason for the Civil War.
It was, and again, he talks about some of the generals who we know very casually with this. Specifically Burgoyne. Right? Yep. He was a young guy, Henry King Burgoyne, who was telling his father, just looking from an economics thing, buy 13-year-old girls, because that's your best investment. And it's tough to read it, admittedly, because, and then there's another story where when the Union Army, the Union Army would invade, and the prices would drop, and you could buy slaves cheap. And there's a story, I forget where the hell where that was. It was Columbia, South Carolina. Yeah. Where there's a Southern guy. He's going Christmas shopping with his daughter, and she wants a doll. And he tells her, and this is the book, he tells her, I can buy you a real doll for less money than that doll, so I'm going to do that. And it's just like, oh my God. But that's just the way. That's just the way it is.
People they're talking about.
It is. And then it talks a lot about the post-war, about the families trying to connect themselves. The biggest fear for a slave was not being killed. It was being separated from your family. And so he talks a lot about the post-war, almost like 9/11, those pictures, people in the photographs on the wall. Have you seen this guy? He disappeared. It was like that post-war. It talks about the Howard and the Freedmen's Bureau. It talks about the rise of religion because slave owners would not allow the slaves to kind of go to church because they would get together and they were afraid of lead to an insurrection. So you had a lot of black churches growing, which still exists today.
Yep.
Because
That's
of
what they grew out of.
And so it really paints a good picture. And again, it's not a judgmental thing. It doesn't paint anybody good versus evil. It just talks about the economic impact. So check out the book in all seriousness, because I think you'll really appreciate it. And he's a good dude, a fellow ACC guy, Mary. So you know he can't go wrong. But I think he really touched on something here that I think a lot of people probably haven't thought about or anticipated.
Because it's a tough subject.
Well, you think you know it, of course, war, slavery, the whole deal. But when you look at the dollars and cents aspect of it all, and you realize how, it was like the mortgage-backed securities in today's world, but with people, and they just looked at them in that mold, both north and south. Yeah. So that's why it's a good read. It's an important read because it'll open your eyes to things that you think you know, but you probably don't anticipate. But if you're a finance guy, for example, if you work in a banking industry and you like the war, and you read this book, it's really fascinating how it was back then. And it's an eye opener. So definitely check it out. I think you'll like it. But if not, listen to the episode and see what you think about it. Because I think
James said it was a good James said it was a great episode. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I enjoyed it. And he's a good guy.
Yeah, I really liked our discussion with him and then talking with him a bit afterwards too, just about, I'd asked him.
And you could also, and you mentioned before, he was on Bjorn's thing.
Yeah.
The Abraham Lincoln Bookshop. You can go check. That's still out there on YouTube. You can go there and you can
on Facebook. It's on Facebook.
I thought it was on YouTube. All right.
On Facebook.
All right. In any case, it's out there. So you can go check that out.
Yeah, because Bjorn and the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, they do the Facebook Lives with the authors, which are really, really awesome. We try to jump on them when we're around. But obviously, like, you can go rewatch them again too. And he's had like Tim Smith on, he's had Colby on, I think he had Dave Powell on. That it is very interesting, like great live streams. And as I was saying, you can purchase the books from them as well, which is cool.
Yeah,
I've got to support those independent. I mean,
no, absolutely.
My grandfather opened an independent bookstore in my hometown, and my uncle still has it running. So I am a big supporter of the independent bookshops.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, especially that one. That's a good
you've
one.
Been there to be.
So was Frank.
Yes.
Although, who has not been there is Amanda Clough, which we're going to see her soon. And I'm going to let her know that I do not forgive her for not going to see Bjorn because she lives in Chicago.
I know. Well, we're going to see her in a few weeks. So I'll have to berate her about that. Bjorn said, yes, that you are correct. They are on YouTube as well. They cross post. Yep. He said, we're a very modern, rare bookshop.
Mm-hmm. No, it's more of a museum than a bookshop. A lot of consignment books, a lot of cool autographs, I think the big Lincoln statue, Mary. Take a picture with it. There you go. Right.
Yep. Estella said she's definitely going to order the book. Yeah, you definitely need to read it, Estella.
Especially, something, going back to the guide exam thing, this is a book that's going to help you with that.
Yeah.
Because it talks a lot about the battles. Thomas Rosser, for example, right, talks about him buying slaves a week before Appomattox. So the war, everything's falling apart, and they're still ingrained. This is the best investment.
Yeah.
And it's just a different thing. But if you're taking that test again, or if you're going to take the test, this is a good byline in case there are questions about the economy in the 1860s leading up to it, because it's important. Because, like we said before, we said this a million times, the average Johnny Reb did not care less about slavery. Okay.
Yeah.
The average foot soldier, but the government and the economy was a huge part of it. And again, rich man's war, poor man's fight, right? That's what we've said this a million times.
Yeah, that's what Caleb said. He appreciates we mentioned that.
And it's important to know. I mean, it's and not every Northern soldier was fighting to free his fellow man. I'm sorry, but that's just not true either. No. But this gives you a good idea of the economy and how it affected the North, the South, and Europe, especially England, which led to the blockade runners, Lion and the Fox, right?
Yep, by Alexander Rose, another excellent book. Another person we've had on this, very lucky to have on this podcast, was Alexander Rose.
Yeah. And so if you're trying to learn this and get a full 360 perspective, because you should be studying both sides, you should be. And if you study too far one side, too far the other, you get skewed, and you just
Yeah.
shut your mind. That's what you should be doing.
Well, we've been told we're too Southern, we're too Northern. We were told recently that we're not an adult podcast because I
Too much
swear.
country, a little bit of rock and roll, Mary.
Yeah. We were told by somebody that we wanted to have statues to the Abraham Lincoln conspirators
Oh yeah.
constructed, but that was a weird flex from that person. Don't
Well,
quite know how he got that, but
sometimes the gerbil falls asleep in the wheel of some people, Mary, unfortunately.
like, but just the one person that was like, I don't know why you have to swear so much. I'm going to go listen to a more adult podcast. I'm like, fine, go.
That's you, by the way.
Thank you for your 1-star review.
Damn
for that.
potty mouth Canadian over here.
I have tried to tone it down, obviously.
You
the best thing was when that guy messaged you or he was on here and he said, I just had to explain to my 12-year-old what special order GTFO was.
Oh, that was a little
round top. Then we met them at Little Round Top.
That's right. We bumped into that guy Little Round Top, and that was funny. That was a good time. But
the kid was like, you could tell the kid had been listening to us. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, the kid was probably like 8 years old. I'm thinking,
he's 12.
Well, I don't know. He was a little shorter than you, so he can't be less than 10. I don't know.
Frank says we're too Eastern.
Yeah, well,
he's just joking because he's from California.
Oh, I see what it is. Well,
he's like, as a Californian, you guys are too Eastern.
I was telling my relatives were a little slow. They fought for the West, different story, but no, but again, you're trying to do so much. And I think when you're trying to get a full, like I said, a full 360 view of the entire war, the experience, you study it. And that's why I'm glad that guide exam here focuses on a lot of it, because if it's just Gettysburg and someone says, well, is it true Longstreet went west and fought at the Battle of Knoxville against Burnside? I don't know.
I asked somebody that studied Longstreet that once.
I know who you're talking about.
No idea about that, and I felt so bad because it was at a round table, and I was like, "Oh, this person does not know." Oh, James just said the Bang Barn.
Bang Barn was one of our first. That was years ago. That still applies though.
That was when we were talking about sickles on one of these lives, and you said, "Could you imagine if I was walking around waving the old handkerchief to, get someone to go to the Bang Barn?" That's where it was like.
Yeah, well, it's fun. It's fun to do that stuff and talk about that stuff. But it's funny. It's funny what people remember about certain things.
Yeah.
Some of us will bump into us and say, "Remember in this episode you guys talked about?" I don't remember. Are you kidding me? I don't know.
The guy with the truck messaged us.
Oh, the Ford. Yeah, I remember saying that though.
By the way, I drive an F-150.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. But anyway,
Bjorn says, "I'm with Frank on this one. You're pro Red Sox bias totally ignores my White Sox, who are currently going 5-1."
Hey Bjorn, if you have any other studs you want to give us for nothing, feel free. That'd be awesome. That's pretty good. Enjoy Kyle Teal. He's going to be pretty good. But Crochet is gonna. I appreciate the help. Anything you can do, Sale, Crochet, anybody else you have, feel free to put their good socks on. It's still revenge from Carlton Fisk. I'm just saying. Okay, so that's what it is. So he knows what I'm talking about.
I saw a White Sox fan driving around the battlefield one day.
Oh, you saw the one?
The one. He had White Sox as his license plate, and he had stickers everywhere. And I was almost going to be like, my condolences to you.
Well, that's cool. You know what? Cubs, White Sox. I'm going White Sox now. So.
Caleb said, "I remember the Bang Barn time. That was funny." He was watching when that happened, when it came out.
Yeah. So Army Navy today, Mary, before we find, we're going to jump off here in a second.
I know there's been a few Navy people on here.
I'm going to tell you right now, Army is going to do ungodly things to Navy today. Okay. This is going to be an absolute rout of a game today. So I appreciate both the Army and the Navy. I'm more of an Army guy, but on paper, this is going to be a hammer and a nail game today. And Army. That game last year in Foxborough was a classic. This year is going to be a tough one. So if you're a Navy guy, anchors away, boys. Anchors away. You're in for a tough one. I think it's going to be a big Army victory today. That's what I'm going for.
There's a nice comment here. I think this person is from Germany, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't pronounce it. But anyway, he said, "Thank you for this podcast. The last episode was fantastic. The last 1.5 years, I've learned so much and found new books and new topics. I wish you and all Merry Christmas." And I can't read German, so I'm not going to butcher that. But thank you so much. Merry Christmas to you too.
Appreciate the good words. And like we said before, we just want to talk about the story. We don't consider ourselves anybody teaching anybody anything. I think I've always looked at it as kind of an arrogant attitude. here's what we just telling the stories, and
We
people.
just like, I mean, when we
if
started this podcast, like we've been asked a couple times, like, how did you, well, Robert Colby, Dr. Colby asked us, like, I want to know how you guys started this, and it was very simple. It was just like, we wanted a way to record our conversations and just like have that kind of bar stool or coffee shop conversation about, why, like, about the Civil War. That's what we wanted to do.
Yeah, it's just coming. That's what we were saying before. Is this was an outlet where we would talk just like this, and you at some point along the way said we should just put this on a podcast and record them. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
And we eventually did it, and that's what it was. But what's great about this is it allows us anyway to kind of study things we normally wouldn't, or brush up on things that we know and want to talk more about. But it's just fun, and we just enjoy the whole experience.
Mike asked why do you dislike Ohio? It's just a joke.
Yeah, well, this
James Aboot.
Okay. The truth of the matter is, I don't really hate Ohio, but there's aspects of my life where stuff has happened to me in Ohio where I shake my head, and we'll leave it at that. It's more of a shtick than anything. But
you and John Hunt Morgan.
Yeah, exactly. God, I have a lot of friends from Ohio and stuff with that. So that's where it comes from. So don't take it personally if you're from Ohio. It's all in good fun. But back in my younger, more vulnerable days, to quote Shakespeare, I got myself in trouble. Too much beer on the campus of Ohio State, and just like John Hunt Morgan, I got to spend the night in Ohio jail. And so ever since then, I've not liked Ohio. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's kind of what it was. So, but again, that's all it is. It's nothing more serious than that.
Oh, but thank you everybody for your kind words and listening to the latest episode, and for joining us for this silly little thing we do. I think we had like 25 people at one point. We have 23 right now. So that's, wow, you guys are awesome to come hang out with us for this time. I know we haven't been on here as much. Next weekend, we're probably going to be doing this on Sunday because I have to work on Saturday.
Hey, speaking of Ohio, did you see Michigan beat them again, by the way?
Yeah.
I mean, they had no chance they beat them. It's funny that works out.
Ghost of Sickles Leg is on here going OHIO.
Hail to the victors, baby. Anyway, no, so that's good. So we're going to do the Trent Affair about a week or so. We'll do that whenever.
Yeah, it's going to drop December 27th. So it'll be after Christmas. So I hope everybody on here, if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all that stuff.
Everything, absolutely. So hopefully you have a safe holiday. Hopefully it's warmer than it is here where you guys are at. Good football today, Mary. Army Navy, watch that. Whoever you root for, it's a great American game. Check that out. And then we'll record our episode next week and have a good time.
James wants to know how Mosby is.
Oh, he's around here somewhere. He's been quiet, so he's been attacking the Christmas tree the way he's been attacking, the Sheridan's lines. So we've been trying to keep him honest with that. So he's been.
He has a little toy mouse that is like, he's disemboweled it and the stuffing is coming out, and that's his favorite one, so we can't take it away from him.
Yeah, that's kind of how it's like his little blankie, but he's been good. He's been fun. So, all right. So everybody have a great Christmas. We'll do this before Christmas again, but if we don't see you,
we'll be on here on Sunday. So before Christmas, we'll see
have a good one. Always look out for your fellow man. Remember, always take care of each other. That's the most important thing in life. If someone gives you a hard time, be nice to them. Always be nice. Always treat people with respect, and it'll come back to you in kind.
Never forget. And we will be back here. I misspoke. We will be back here next Sunday. So before Christmas, we will do another one of these. And our next episode will drop after Christmas on December 27th. So
that is true. Mary,
appreciate all your support.
Go Army.
Everybody.
Go Army, Mary. Go Army.
Go Army.
31-14. Take that to the bank. Bet everything. Bet the house. Black Knights 31, Navy 14. Anyway, off we go. Have a great weekend, guys. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see you next weekend. And we appreciate you listening. Please check out this book.
Yeah.
It's a great book. You really appreciate it. If not, that's cool too. Check out the episode, and we appreciate your support as always. Peace out, Mary.
Yep. See y'all later.